What if I told you that the serpent from the story of Genesis, the one responsible for kicking off the whole fall of man narrative, wasn't really a snake at all? Wait, what? Yep, that's right. For centuries, we've been told that the serpent who tempted Eve was a sly, slithering creature. But when we dig into the original Hebrew texts, something fascinating emerges. The word used for this so-called serpent isn't just about snakes. It's actually something much more mystical, complex, and far-reaching. So why was this story simplified into a reptilian villain? And what's really hiding behind the term nahash? Let's start with the story most of us know: Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, the forbidden fruit, and, of course, the serpent who convinces Eve to take a bite. For thousands of years, this story has been told in churches, schools, and around the dinner table. And in nearly every retelling, the serpent is painted as a literal snake. You know the kind, scaly, hissing, slithering along the ground. But what if that interpretation is wrong? What if the serpent wasn't a serpent at all? In the original Hebrew text of the Bible, the word used for the creature is nahash. But here's the catch. Nahash doesn't just mean snake. It's actually a much more complex term that can also refer to a shining one, a creature of divine or supernatural origin. So how did this being go from a mystical figure to a simple snake? That's where things get really interesting. To really understand what's going on here, we have to break down the original Hebrew term used in Genesis. The word nahash comes from a root that can mean a few things depending on the context. It can mean serpent, yes, but it can also mean diviner or enchanter. Even more intriguingly, it can mean shining one, suggesting something divine or otherworldly. So why did we settle on snake when the word nahash could mean so much more? Some scholars believe that the original story of Genesis may have been trying to convey the presence of a supernatural being, something more akin to an angel or a godlike figure. The nahash wasn't just a talking reptile. It may have been a symbol of knowledge and power, a being capable of changing the course of human history. This isn't just wild speculation. In ancient Jewish texts outside the traditional Bible, particularly in mystical works like the Kabbalah, the nahash is seen as a being of light, not a slithering snake. In fact, in these interpretations, the nahash is more of a celestial figure, a guardian of hidden knowledge. So, how did this divine being end up crawling on its belly in our modern understanding? Could the real meaning of nahash have been lost or altered as the story was passed down? Let's take a trip back to early Jewish interpretations of the Genesis story. Long before the Bible was canonized, Jewish scholars were wrestling with the meaning of this mystical creature in the Garden of Eden. For them, the nahash wasn't just a snake, it was a symbol of knowledge, perhaps even of enlightenment. In these early interpretations, the nahash could be seen as a kind of trickster figure. Yes, but also as a being that gave humanity something precious, the awareness of good and evil. This idea was particularly popular in mystical Jewish traditions, where the nahash was linked to the divine quest for knowledge. This makes sense when you consider the dual nature of the nahash as both an enchanter and a shining one. Was the serpent evil for leading Eve to knowledge, or was it a liberator, freeing humanity from ignorance? The answer might depend on who's telling the story and why. So how did the nahash, this divine, shining figure, get reduced to a villainous snake crawling in the dirt? To answer that, we need to look at how the story evolved as it was passed down through different cultures and political climates. In early Jewish and Christian traditions, particularly as religious authority began to solidify, there was a growing need to establish clear lines between good and evil. The nahash, with its ambiguous nature, posed a problem. It represented both knowledge and temptation, both light and shadow. And for religious leaders looking to control the narrative, that kind of ambiguity could be dangerous. By the time the Bible was translated into Latin and other languages, the interpretation of the nahash had already shifted. No longer a complex symbol of divine knowledge, the serpent was now a clear villain. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The nahash isn't the only divine or supernatural being associated with serpents in ancient texts. In fact, across many cultures, serpents were often linked to wisdom and knowledge, not evil. In Sumerian mythology, the god Enki was associated with serpents and was known as the protector of wisdom. In Hindu tradition, the Nagas are serpent-like beings who guard sacred wisdom. Even in ancient Egyptian mythology, the serpent was a symbol of both power and protection, represented by the goddess Wasnt. So, could the Genesis serpent have originally been part of this broader tradition of serpentine symbols representing knowledge and divinity? And if so, why was this symbolism changed in the biblical story? The answer, once again, may lie in the need for early religious leaders to present a simpler, more easily controlled narrative. By turning the nahash into a snake, they removed its connection to wisdom and divine knowledge, reinforcing the idea that disobedience leads to punishment. Let's take a look at one of the most fascinating twists on the Genesis serpent, the Gnostic tradition. The Gnostics were an early Christian group who saw the world very differently than the emerging Orthodox Church. In their view, the God of the Old Testament wasn't the ultimate divine being, but rather a lesser, flawed deity called the Demiurge. And guess who they saw as the true liberator of humanity? Yep, the serpent. In Gnostic teachings, the serpent wasn't a villain at all. It was a being of light, a guide who helped humanity awaken to their true nature. By offering Eve the fruit of the tree of knowledge, the serpent gave humanity the gift of consciousness and self-awareness, something the Demiurge wanted to keep hidden. For the Gnostics, the serpent wasn't a deceiver. It was a liberator, a hero who helped humans break free from ignorance and find their true spiritual path. So, what's the truth about the Genesis serpent? Was it a snake, a divine being, a trickster, or a hero? The answer may depend on which lens you're looking through. But one thing is clear. The story of the serpent has been twisted, simplified, and altered over the centuries, losing much of its original complexity. But here's the real question. If the serpent's true identity was hidden, what other stories in the Bible have been simplified or twisted? Maybe we've only scratched the surface of the secrets these ancient texts hold. What do you think? Is it time we revisit more of these tales with fresh eyes? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories.